The high-stakes game of royal chicken is finally over, and Prince Andrew is the one who blinked. For decades, the Duke of York sat behind the fortified walls of Royal Lodge, convinced he was untouchable, protected by the ghost of his mother's favoritism and a lease he thought was an ironclad shield. But the reality of a modern, cash-strapped monarchy under King Charles III has finally caught up with him. The king hasn't just issued an eviction notice, he has performed a financial execution. The private security team is gone, the £1 million sovereign allowance has been slashed to zero, and the unmarked white removal vans have finally rolled through the gates of the 30-room Windsor mansion. This isn't just a change of address, it is the total, messy collapse of the York household. A domestic empire built on borrowed time, questionable money, and an ego that refused to acknowledge that the guard has changed and the bank is closed. The king simply stopped the bleeding of royal funds that had been propping up his younger brother's lifestyle, making it clear that the era of luxury living on the crown's dime is dead and buried. Without that sovereign lifeline, Andrew found himself staring down the barrel of a lease trap he couldn't escape. The terms of his 75-year lease on Royal Lodge were clear. Maintain the property to a royal standard or lose the keys. The bill for the crumbling masonry, the leaking roof, and the peeling paint has now reportedly topped £7.5 million. Andrew, a man with no official income and a reputation that is now firmly in the gutter, simply does not have the cash to fix a palace. The king offered him a brutal choice: find the millions to stop the rot, or pack your bags. The arrival of the white lorries this week tells us exactly how that math worked out. He is being traded down from a 30-room Grade 2 listed stronghold to Marsh Farm, a property that feels less like a royal residence and more like a rural exile. It is a humiliating downgrade for a man who once believed he was second only to the Queen. Reports from the front lines of this move suggest Andrew is not going quietly. Upon his first visit to the new Sandringham home, the Duke reportedly threw a full-scale tantrum. He is said to be appalled by the pokey dimensions of the farmhouse, complaining that it only has 5 bedrooms. To an ordinary citizen, a 5-bedroom farmhouse in Norfolk is a dream. To Andrew, it's a prison cell. He hasn't lived in a space that small since he left his bachelor pad at Buckingham Palace. And back then, he had the run of the entire palace and an army of staff to anticipate his every whim. Now, he's worried about where he'll park his fleet of expensive cars and who will cook his dinner. The transition has turned into what insiders call a room-by-room excavation. This isn't just a move. It's an archaeological dig through decades of accumulated clutter and royal memorabilia that he refuses to simply throw in a skip, dragging the process out to a painfully slow crawl. Behind those grand walls, the life Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson lived was far from the polished image of royal duty. New accounts from former staff describe a household ruled by fear, characterized by a demand for absolute control that bordered on the pathological. The centerpiece of this psychological profile is what insiders have dubbed the teddy bear protocol. This isn't just a funny story about a quirky hobby. It is the smoking gun of a man obsessed with a reality that no longer exists. Andrew reportedly owned 72 stuffed toys, all dressed in intricate uniforms and sailor suits. Every morning, staff were required to arrange them on his bed in a precise, pre-approved order, from the largest to the smallest. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a mandate. A laminated diagram was kept on the bedside table, showing exactly where every bear had to go. One former guard who saw the diagram said it resembled a battlefield layout, more than a bedroom routine. Every evening, the bears had to be removed and placed around the room in the same pre-approved pattern, including a group stacked carefully inside the unused fireplace. This obsession with his toys was a window into a man who felt the world was slipping away and was desperate to control the one thing he still had power over: his servants. Former maids have described Andrew as short-tempered, rude, and fundamentally entitled. Staff were terrified to make a mistake, knowing a minor error, whether a curtain drawn too tightly or a breakfast tray set slightly off-center, could trigger an angry response that echoed through the lodge. He didn't view his employees as professionals. He treated them as if they were beneath him. One former aide remarked that you could hear the prince shouting before you even saw him. It was a military-style operation, where the rules were stricter than anywhere else in the royal fold, all to satisfy the whims of a man who had lost his titles and his honors, but still wanted his shoes lined up with surgical precision. Even now, as his world shrinks to a 5-bedroom farmhouse, he reportedly still expects the same bowing and scraping from the technicians and builders currently renovating his new home. Reduced to a state of near-total isolation, Andrew's primary concern has reportedly shifted from international trade deals to the technical specifications of his new living room. Insiders report that his top, non-negotiable priority for the move to Marsh Farm was a comprehensive Sky TV package, complete with high-speed broadband and full access to adult content. The man who once traveled the world as a naval hero is now being mocked in the servants' break rooms as a sad figure tethered to a television screen. The technicians at Marsh Farm have been treated with the urgency of a state matter as they install satellite dishes and high-speed wiring, all so the prince can fill his empty hours with news, sports, and pornography. It is a pathetic end for a man who once stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, now arguing over the speed of his internet connection so he can watch TV in exile while waiting for the flood defenses to fail. While Andrew was obsessing over his toys and his television, the financial shadow over the household was growing darker. Sarah Ferguson was facing her own reckoning. Her debts have reportedly hit the £5 million mark, a staggering sum for someone who hasn't been a working royal since the 90s. The bad Fergie persona she once joked about became a liability that the palace could no longer ignore. The most damning evidence of the household's decay is found in the paper trail of unpaid wages. An email from 2011 recently resurfaced, sent by her assistant Johnny O'Sullivan, pleading for nearly $60,000 in back pay. O'Sullivan described his situation as one of real hardship, struggling to pay for his MBA while the Yorks lived in luxury. The bailout for that specific debt didn't come from the Yorks' own pockets. It came from Jeffrey Epstein. The convicted sex offender reportedly stepped in to pay £15,000 to settle the O'Sullivan matter, a transaction that Ferguson later called a gigantic error of judgment. But the records suggest it was more than a one-time mistake. Epstein reportedly provided Ferguson with financial support for roughly 15 years, a cozy arrangement that only ended when he got tired of her constant requests for cash. This wasn't just about bad luck. It was about a lifestyle that the Yorks felt entitled to but could not afford. From the infamous cash for access scandal, where Ferguson was caught on camera offering to sell access to Andrew for £500,000, to the Sunninghill Park deal, the pattern is clear. In 2010, Andrew sold his Sunninghill mansion, a wedding gift from the Queen, for £15 million. This was £3 million above the asking price, paid by Timur Kulibayev, a Kazakh businessman. The overpayment sparked immediate suspicion that the extra millions were an indirect way of buying royal influence, earning Andrew the nickname Air Miles Andy for his frequent use of private jets, while allegedly entertaining dozens of women on trips to Thailand and Hong Kong. But the final pillar of his support has now crumbled. Sarah Ferguson has reportedly finally cut off all contact with Andrew. Insiders insist this isn't about morals. She stayed through the Epstein scandal and the civil trials. This is about survival and the bottom line. Now that Andrew can no longer provide a free home and a zero-rent lifestyle, the Duchess is out. She is reportedly fed up with living in Andrew's mess and is looking to save what little reputation she has left. The rumor mill is already spinning with talk of a 7-figure tell-all TV interview. She stayed when things were toxic, but she's leaving now that things are expensive. For the first time in 20 years, the happiest divorced couple in the world will live apart, ending an arrangement that frustrated the palace for decades. Sarah is reportedly searching for her own independent property, finally realizing that the Royal Lodge safety net has been shredded. The move to Marsh Farm is a massive step down, and the house itself is a logistical nightmare. Insiders describe it as a ramshackle place that has sat empty for years. More alarmingly, the house sits on a documented floodplain. While Andrew was once worried about royal protocol, he will now have to worry about the Wolverton pumping station. Residents in the area are advised to register for flood alerts, because if the local defenses fail, the house could be underwater. At Marsh Farm, the threat isn't just water, it's vermin. Pest control vans have already been spotted at the site, dealing with rats and mice that have taken over the roof spaces. Because the Sandringham estate reportedly has a strict no cats policy for tenants, the rodents have had a free run of the place. The man who demanded 72 teddy bears be arranged by a laminated map is moving into a house where the only thing he'll be micromanaging is a rat infestation and a lack of garage space for his expensive cars. The tension surrounding this move reached a fever pitch in November when the Metropolitan Police moved in to seize Andrew's privately owned firearms. Andrew reportedly exploded in a fit of rage when asked to surrender his gun license. It was a scene of pure royal melodrama. The Duke shouting at police officers, refusing to hand over his weapons, until Sarah Ferguson had to step in to de-escalate the situation. The guns didn't go to an armory, they went directly to the king. It was another privilege gone, another reminder that his life is narrowing to a point. He will have no staff quarters at Marsh Farm. The constant assistance he has known his entire life is vanishing. The king is expected to provide a cleaner or a cook on an as-needed basis. But the army of aides is a thing of the past. Even his daughters have seen the writing on the wall. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie haven't just distanced themselves from the scandals. They have practically fled the country. To save their own brands and protect their young families from the toxic cloud hanging over their parents, the sisters have established lives abroad. Eugenie is spending her time in Portugal, where her husband Jack Brooksbank works in property management. Beatrice divides her time between the United States and Europe. They are the collateral damage of a parental legacy built on excess and arrogance. Their retreat is a clear signal that the House of York has no future in the new reign of King Charles. They have chosen to move on, even as their father clings to the wreckage of his former life, screaming about the size of his new bedrooms. As the last of the boxes are loaded onto the removal vans, the image of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor moving to a farmhouse in Norfolk is the ultimate picture of a fall from grace. He is a man stripped of his status, his security, and his grand stage. He is trading a 30-room mansion for a 5-bedroom house with a leaky roof, a flood warning, and a satellite dish. The king has successfully streamlined the monarchy, and in doing so, he has surgically removed the most problematic branch of the family tree. The Yorks are out, the money is gone, and the era of royal entitlement has officially come to a grinding, quiet halt in a modest farmhouse far from the corridors of power. Andrew is finally finding out what happens when the money stops, the staff leave, and you are left alone in a house where the only thing you have left to control is a television remote. From the balconies of Buckingham Palace to a damp field in Norfolk, the journey of the favorite son has ended in isolated mockery.